Today is the International Day for Human Rights, and for human rights, I'm going to talk some African American history. And African American history is, for some reason, it's different than American history. There's a black history and there's a white history, and I mean we know the reason, and there's issues that comes out of that. In fact, the whole designation of white and black people comes from the racialization of slavery, in conjunction with Johann Blumenbach, who coined the word Caucasian in 1795. So the page that I got up right now, this Wikipedia page, is the majority minority page, and the majority minority is a state that has less than 50% white people, but the white people are still the majority. Hence, they're the minority, but the majority minority, because they're the minority, because they're not in the majority no more, but they're the biggest majority, so therefore they're more of a plurality. And there's a couple states that are like this. So most of America is white America. Kentucky is 80-90% white, and there's many counties that are like 99% white. So it's lily white. It's probably not as white as Iowa, but it's pretty daggone white. And so we see a map here on the right hand side, and it's got California, and it's got New Mexico, and it's got Texas, who's all they're majority minority states, meaning that white people are not the majority in those states. The pink ones means they're starting to go that way. So, you got Nevada and Arizona, Georgia, Florida. It's like Maryland and New York. So the green ones were formerly majority minority states, but since has been revoked, I guess, the Louisiana and South Carolina. And South Carolina is a huge deal, okay, because after Reconstruction happened, 1863, Abraham Lincoln does the Emancipation Proclamation. The North wins the Civil War, and they passed three amendments, the so-called Radical Republicans, because the Radical Republicans, it was meant to be used as a pejorative, as an insult. The Radical Republicans were going to change radically the laws of the United States. And so the Civil War amendments, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment, are known as Civil War amendments. They were set to enfranchise African Americans, newly freed slaves. Were going to become citizens of these United States. And the amendments passed the federal government, and for that to happen. And then the military federal occupation of the South lasted until 1877, after the corrupt bargain between the Rutherford B. Hayes and Tilden. So Tilden v. Hayes. There's a corrupt bargain, and eventually they said that the Republican would become the president as long as the federal troops, the occupation of the South, had ended. And so the occupation ended in 1877. And so from 1865, the end of the Civil War, to 1877, there were politicians in place that were fighting the good fight, that were doing the right things, that were getting closer. They wanted equality, and then they wanted enfranchisement with the right to vote. So they were envisioning, an America that was integrationist, and that was didn't have the color line that distinguished it so much. And so those years, 66 to 77, those 11 years, represents a highlight, a bright, shining moment for the United States. It shows us that one time we were doing things right. And it's actually fascinating to me because the South Carolina, the majority of South Carolina was being controlled by black folks. So 1868 Constitution happens. In the 1866 Constitution, it was primarily black folks. So the 1868 Constitution of South Carolina was the first state to secede. Now, South Carolina, even though it was the first state to secede, is not only, it's a majority minority. It's not even a majority state. The majority of South Carolinas in 1868 were slaves. There was more slaves than there were slave owners in South Carolina. So when black people got the right to vote, they got more representatives to the Constitutional Convention in 1868, and then when they formed the government, the lower house had majority black constituents. The lower house, which was based on population. And so they were able to get one house of the government. They got one arm of, they got half of the legislature, which is one of three branches. So they got half of one of three branches. And then that freaks the South out. And then the Ku Klux Klan comes out. The occupation ends. And then it goes back to de facto slavery, sharecropping slash segregation, lynching, hate strikes, and all the fucking bullshit. Right? Lynching actually increased after the Civil War because lynching wasn't used as a weapon to smash black folks into their place because the law of the land was slavery. So there was no need to scare the black folks into their place, and so therefore lynching didn't happen until after the Civil War. So the Civil War happens and it's over. Black people are supposedly have the right to vote and be free, right? I heard about this one story of a black man who became free, and he just sat on the corner of a town, and someone was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just enjoying my freedom. I'm sitting here being free. What are you doing? What's going on about your day?" And so I think this is a bright, shining moment. This is a great example. The point of learning history isn't so much to get you down, because history does repeat itself, and people are just fucking evil. All the time, there's always fucking atrocities and bullshit that happens. Anytime working people stand up to fight back, they'll usually get gunned down by the federal government. And so there's wars, there's slavery, genocide. So history really, there's a lot of bad things that happen through history. But the point of learning history is A, for the background knowledge and the foundation. But B, is to find those heroes, is find those bright shining moments of when we actually did do, in the face of adversity, in the face of racism and capitalism, imperialism, in face of, just unjust, evil, psychotic terrorists. The Ku Klux Klan is a terrorist, the first terrorist organization, low intensity warfare organization that attacks population for political means. They're a terrorist organization, they're a terrorist group, and they're the first ones in the United States. So that's that's what white people were going outside the bounds of law in order to maintain a racial dictatorship, in order to maintain a racial hierarchy. So Reconstruction, again, it's a bright shining moment. Eventually it fails, so we don't have that. But when I learned about that, the black folks had controlled the state convention. They had wrote up this 1868 Constitution, and then once the Constitution was written up, they also had they were able to get a majority of the lower house. So that's incredible. That's absolutely amazing. I even have a list somewhere around here of all the names. There's a man named Hunter, and there's a man named I don't know, Larigold or something. No, he wasn't named Larigold. Here it is. Delegates to the State Constitutional Convention, 1868. So you have John A. Hunter and you have Hudson J. Lomax. This is all the people. So you have like over 100 representatives, but the majority of these folks were black Americans, newly freed. And there was even a passage that said something about how the state of South Carolina were more it's split 50, not 50-50. In fact, it's like 66-33. But you had the white slave fucking owners that try to secede and get out of the government and maintain their hierarchy, and then you have the newly free black folks who represent the majority of the government. They were excited. They were really excited that all this stuff was happening. This represents a huge departure from the past. A new constitution consolidates their power, and the reason why they were constructing a new constitution was so that they could get back into the Union. All the state constitutions had to rewrite their constitutions, and they had to pledge allegiance to the United States and say that they would never secede again, and that they would outlaw slavery. And then once they wrote a new constitution, the majority of the state ratified it, then they would be welcomed back into the Union. And so that was Reconstruction. How do you, we just conquered the South. All these formerly Confederate states now have to be brought back inside the Union. They're now our brothers again. And so when they come back into the Union, how are they going to do it? So, Lincoln had like a 10% plan, 10% of the population pledge allegiance. And So Lincoln's plan, because he was assassinated, gets thrown out the door, and Andrew Johnson takes a hold of it, and he was very lax and essentially let Reconstruction fail. So the assassination of Abraham Lincoln had an effect, had a substantial effect, and I would even argue if Lincoln was allowed to live, that black folks would have been free for a long ass time. Why did we have to have the civil rights movement of the 1960s when black folks were free after the Civil War? And the reason why is because the social push of the white supremacists eventually won over. The social push, the extrajudicial type of fucking proceedings, their violence and their Mississippi plans and their lynchings and shit, eventually won the day. They were able to take back their governments. But for a shining moment, we have a bright shining moment. 1868, we have a convention, mostly made up of black folks, and the Constitution that they created was very progressive. It was very inclusive of lots of things, and it pledged allegiance. It did all the things it was supposed to do, but it also introduced public schools and said that none of the public schools has a right to discriminate against any other public school. So since they have no right to discriminate, that means that there's going to be black schools. Eventually they're going to rewrite the Constitution in 1895. The white supremacists outlaw interracial marriages. They outlaw integration in the schools. They said that the public school systems must be segregated. So that was, it was good and bad in a way, because in some regards, segregation actually provided protection for black folks. But the school system, when there was black schools, the poor whites said, "How come we don't have it?" Then they got schools too. So the education system was very much. I don't know if the education system would have been as popular if black folks hadn't got schools first. It's like, hey, why do they get schools and we don't? So poor whites cried about that, and eventually there's 2 schools. In fact, there's 2 water fountains, 2 public restrooms, there's 2 everything. So all these state governments were spending twice the amount of money for public amenities. And when you look at today, what amenities do we have today? Where are the public restrooms? You have to go to a McDonald's or a gas station to use the restroom. Where are the water fountains? Most gas stations don't even have water fountains. Where are they? They're nowhere to be found. So we're actually seeing we don't. It's weird where we had segregated before. We had 2 water fountains. We had 2 public restrooms, and perhaps that competition created more goods for the public. I don't know, but the point of all this is the heroes. So the heroes were the people of this convention, and there's several pages here I want to talk about and get through. But that's the main point. In 1868, South Carolina, the majority of the convention, of the Constitutional Convention, had wrote up their own constitution. The 1868 South Carolina Constitution. Then, after they had written it, the House, they had executive, judicial, and legislative branch. I think they actually had like a tri-part, I don't know, a 3 sort of part system. I think that's the judicial, legislative, executive partition, just like the national government. And then once they got the national government, they were able to get half of the legislature. So the judicial branch and the executive and the other half of the legislature was in white hands. But because of South Carolina's success, the white people got freaked out. Woodrow Wilson said that Dwight D. Griffith, D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation was like writing history with lightning. And so he was saying that it was correct. After Civil War, black people got all the power, whites were going to become their slaves, and then the heroic KKK comes and saves the day. That's Woodrow Wilson. That's the person who drove us into World War I for no apparent reason whatsoever. He was also invaded Haiti and invaded Mexico, and he invaded whatever he could invade, right? He was making war for peace. He was for democracy, making the world safe for democracy. So there's a lot of pages here. I'm gonna get to the Civil Rights Act. They passed a whole bunch of they passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and then there was the 1866. This is the federal government that passed the Civil Rights of 1866, passed the Civil Rights of 1870, 1871, and 1875. So Civil Rights Act has been passed 4 times before the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and I even found something for 1991. So Malcolm X made the argument: why do you assume that laws are going to change the nature of America when they haven't changed the nature of America when they were first, passed? He at the speech at Oxford University, Malcolm X had pointed out that the Supreme Court had passed in '54 the that Brown versus the Board of Education, that discrimination was illegal. So he said that they already passed laws, and what is happening is you could pass all the laws that you want, but you need to change the culture and the people, because if the people don't abide by the law, if they don't enforce the law, or if they outright openly call for its sort of destruction, like how the Confederates were doing with the South Carolina, and eventually they won out, right? So they protested enough to where eventually these ex-Confederates who had lost the war eventually get control of the government. They get to play, oh, we're the victims and we're getting, tyranny upon us and we don't know what's going on, and they get to cry about the bloody shirt while at the same time holding their white supremacist views and getting power, which was the point, which was the whole point of the to fight against the war anyways, was to get power. But once they get power, they were in the Union. The United States was saved and the Union was saved. So Lincoln did what he, what he was out to do, save the Union. So Reconstruction, they have, so after, the Confederates lose and the Reconstruction happens right after the Civil War. Now what happens? The Confederates get no power. Their land are taken away from them. The Freedmen's Bureau is passed. Black people have a federal agency that's protecting their rights, and then the governments have to be rearranged. So they have to get new governments. And so what happened was the white people who supported the Republicans, they were known as scallywags, and then there was carpetbaggers, people who came from the north to the south in order to help the government or take advantage of the political vacuum that has been given to it. The scallywags, it's a pejorative term too. It's an insult. Scallywag, you're a scallywag. But a scallywag is actually a good thing. A scallywag is a white person in the South who believed in Abraham Lincoln and the end of slavery. That was a scallywag. Those who had got into government and they believed in Abraham Lincoln's anti-slavery message and his Union message. So that's what a scallywag was, a Southern person who believed in Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican, first Republican president, the first third party to become a major political party. So the Republican coalition of freedmen, carpetbaggers, scallywags was in control, supported by Union Army forces. They established public education, welfare institutions, and home rule for counties, expanding democracy. So this is amazing. This is they're not only getting schools, but they have welfare institutions, so they're helping people eat bread, right? So poor white South Carolinas can get some help from the government. And then this, most important, I think, is the home rule for counties. Home rule means that the counties have a substantial amount of control of the day-to-day affairs of the people's business. Home rule, no legislator is going to give all their power away, but home rule essentially says that within the state of Carolina, the counties have the power, and it's not, they decentralize their government, which is amazing. That is democratizing their state. So that's a step in the right direction, regardless of who says the right idea. It shouldn't matter what mouth a good idea comes out of. A good idea, especially an idea whose time has come, is just a good idea. It's just one that you would want to go ahead and pass. So until the 1868 presidential election, South Carolina's legislature, not the voters, chose the state's electors for the presidential election. South Carolina was the last state to choose its electors in this manner. On October 19, 1871, President Ulysses S. Grant suspended habeas corpus in 9 South Carolina counties under the authority of the Ku Klux Klan Act. And I think that's actually what one of the civil rights is, the Ku Klux Klan Act, or the Force Act. And so eventually somebody's going to, they called this German who actually I think founded kindergartner a carpetbagger or a scallywag, and he was very much racist. He was actually against the fucking Ku Klux Klan Act, which is disappointing. a German who brought kindergarten into the United States. They called him a scallywag, and so eventually he caved to the pressure of the Confederates, and he opposed, yeah, U.S. Grant intervening to stop the Klan. That's fucking bullshit. The Klan is going around fucking terrorizing the states. The federal government is occupying the South, so how are they able to get away with their lawlessness? If we're truly a nation of laws and a black person had committed a crime, he gets a trial, he gets a fair trial, he gets representation, he gets a hearing. And that goes for everybody. When we protect, the great thing about a revolutionary is you can point out injustice anywhere that you see it, because it looks the exact same no matter who it's being done to. Injustice is just injustice. And Grant's Attorney General Amos Ackerman, hundreds of Klansmen were arrested while 2,000 Klansmen fled the state. So he was able to kick the fucking Klan out of South Carolina. So it was done to stop them from, being fucking assholes. So good for Ulysses S. Grant. The federal occupation was necessary in order to keep the Confederate aristocrats subdued. Just like what we saw as soon as the occupation ended, that's when the Civil War experiment ended. All that bloodshed for nothing. And Kentucky, the Union, most of the Germans fought for the Union. They fought for the North, and they fought for the right side. And but because of the politics, they won the war. And in Kentucky, they're known to have seceded after the Appomattox. They seceded after the Civil War, meaning their government, their governors, the people who won the political establishment were former Confederates. So what did the fucking Confederates lose? They still got power, now they have to fucking abide by being part of the Union, but they got power regardless. They lost their slavery, but they passed slave codes and they passed all this other fucking racist bullshit in order to keep the black man down. So here's another the fact that I've been saying over and over again. There was a bright shining moment in American history for black folks, white folks too. Chris Rock actually said a bunch of fucking fascinating comments. Said Obama is white progress, not black progress, and he's right. The whole affirmative action type candidate, the whole token idea. It's like, hey, we feel good about ourselves because we voted, for a black man. And while that's a great thing, that is progress. He's right that it's white progress. It's white people being accepting of others. So good for white people for being accepting of others. But Barack Obama isn't your typical black person. He's not your typical man. He's actually, his talents and the way he's well spoken, he's more talented than most white and black people in America. But compared to, like, I don't know, here in the timber mill, the fucking boss enlightened me that he thinks that Obama is a nigger, right? And that's fucking bullshit. It's bullshit on many fucking fronts. It makes me think of Malcolm X's joke, what do you call a black man who has a PhD? What does a white man call a black man who gets a PhD? Nigger. And the point is, no matter how high a black man will get, for some people, they will always think of black people as being inferior, as being less than them. And you know what? I hope their fucking whole worldview, fucking their head explodes. Nothing makes sense to them, because this very talented black man is president. And if black people were inferior, how the fuck is he doing way better in life than you? And so basically you're a liar, you're a racist, and you've been lying your whole fucking time. And your hatred, your racial hatred, may stem from your self-hatred or some other fucking bullshit. Maybe your parents made you a slave and beat you up, and so you're just resentful of everybody, and you become a fucking soulless Nazi, fucking fascist dickhole, just like the majority of the fucking, power apparatus. And if that's the case, then fucking shame on you. Fucking get a damn soul. Get some fucking humanity. If you think that, the racial hatred, if you're not down with their racism, that hatred rolls on top of you, and it's based on nothing. It's based on nothing. And white people started it first, so white people got to knock it off first. And they know they're doing it. They know they're on that fucking bullshit. My point with Obama, though, is, there's a whole thing that there's good and bad in every group, right? So Some people say I don't hate blacks, I hate niggers. There's that rationalization, and the idea is that there's bad blacks and there's good blacks, and that's absolutely true. That's true with every group out there. There's bad ones and there's good ones. There's no group of human beings that's just like, all those people are good. Supposedly the Amish are good, but they had taken the fence post off the land here before I got it. So that's not good. They're like vultures, right? They saw that the land was unoccupied, so they came back. Maybe they took their own shit back. I don't know. But that's a group. That's a group that you would think, oh, they're Christian and good and orderly and kind, and no, not exactly. They're at least there's one report of them being fence post thieves. Okay, so that's my point being is when they said that of Obama, not only okay, you're a fucking racist piece of shit and you're fucking stupid. You think all black people are fucking less than you, you dumb fucking. You're the guy who said it's like basically fucking borderline. There's something mentally just his IQ is real. He's just dumb. He's just real simple and dumb, and so maybe that's why he understands racism because he's real dumb. But the other part of it is that Obama isn't a bad black person. So not only is he, it's stupid. Your racism is just fucking retarded and makes no fucking sense at all, and needs to be thrown in the fucking gutter. But the other level is that Barack Obama is a really good man. Period. Whether black or white, he's half white too, right? White people trying to take credit. No, he's half white, and that's true. He is half white. So that's something we need to take into context too. Before being black meant you only had one drop, or you only had, if you were 1/8 black, you were black, and that's so in some places because of 11% blood that I got, I would be black, but in other places I would not be black. But that's the one drop rule. That's using white supremacist rule. So where are we at now? We have a half white, half black man who was our president, and that's probably the only way it could have happened that way, right? That is white progress. So it makes me think of Cat Williams. What I was trying to say, he said that he was a nigger and that he was a bad guy, and that's just not the case. Cat Williams was like this. His bit is something like this nigga here. He doesn't have a tattoo. He don't owe anybody $200. He don't have no piercing. He don't have no baby mamas out in the woodworks. Nobody coming out saying that he lied or that he done anything. Where did you get this nigga here? And so he was kind of pointing out that he recognized that Barack Obama was really fucking, fantastic. He was fucking, picturesque, cookie cutter. Where the fuck did this person come from? And so the whole McCain, the biggest celebrity in the world, and some people say he's a magic Negro and all this other shit. There's not something to him being a magic Negro, but Barack Obama did come out of nowhere, and because he was such Joe Biden said he was clean. Wow, Barack Obama's clean. So that's basically how Biden said the exact same thing that Cat Williams was saying, and got blasted over it too. But he was saying he was clean, he was articulate, he could speak well. And there's white people that aren't very clean, so I think that's actually, white people can learn from Barack Obama's hygiene. But the point was that he was not just a really good, candidate, not just a good man, but for being a black man. And I guess there is some racial connotation to that, because even Cat Williams is saying, where did you get him at? Where did you get this black man at that's got no spots on, that has been absolutely just flying under the radar and is just a fucking badass? Where did he come from? And so there is a racial connotation to that. The idea is so for Cat Williams, this being black mean the lowest common denominator, like the person on the corner. He's a crackhead, he's robbing people, he's he's bad, and he's for whatever reason. But he's not that man is solidly black. Oh yeah, he's black. Yeah, oh, definitely he's black. That's a real nigga, right? And there's an argument about Barack Obama not being black enough. He's half white. His dad was an African. He doesn't have the long history of slavery, and none of his ancestors endured slavery, so he doesn't understand how it actually is here. And then his response to that was, I've had taxis that passed me up. I've had discrimination that happened to me. He's a black man. I mean, America would have looked at Barack Obama and said he's a black man and treated, him accordingly. So he would have got the same discrimination, whether his ancestors got slavery or not. And his father was Africa. So, the Western nations have been raping Africa for a long ass time, and all slaves came from, Africa. All of African Americans had come from Africa at some point in time. So that's actually a really stupid argument. He's not black enough, and that presupposes that being black means being bad, being the worst. No, he's totally black enough. He's more than black enough, and he's a badass. He's just a badass man. So, and I am starting to like Barack Obama. I've been opposing him because of his imperialist policies and his NSA wiretapping for a long time, ever since he's been in there. But when he's gone, I'm going to miss him. And if we go fucking more Republican, we had a fucking shot. We had a chance. And frankly, we fucking blew it. Yeah, some part could be put on him, but he's, young and inexperienced. He was trying to reach out to the damn Republicans. Maybe the people will see that the Republicans have been assholes. So far, they haven't seen it. So far, they're re-electing the same fucking assholes that wrecked the system and that's trying to wreck Obama. That's fucked up. And it's even more fucked up to, the South Carolina to get back on track to where I'm at now. To get back on track, South Carolina, the black folks had comprised 71 to 76 of the 124 members of the Constitutional Convention. So 124, half of that's 62. They had 71 to 76. The majority of the Constitutional Convention of South Carolina in 1868 were black people. And white Republicans and scallywags, right? And carpetbaggers. White Republicans who either came from the North, carpetbagger, or a white Republican from the South, scallywag. They're supposed to be pejorative. They're bad terms. These radical Republicans is made up of nothing but carpetbaggers and scallywags, because carpetbaggers and scallywags are bad things, and we don't want, the Republicans saying that black people should be allowed to be in our schools. There's a song, there's a racist song. We don't want niggers in our school. We're not for integration. And that was in 1950s, 1960s that song came out. And so they were able to persist. It's amazing to me that South Carolina had a majority, at the Constitutional Convention and at the legislature in 1868. And they don't even have that today. No states even have that. We are so far removed from how this great, bright, shining moment of history, after this had happened, after Reconstruction fails, they don't even get close to having control in the state government. And in terms of, there's only been 8 senators in the U.S., U.S. House of Senate, the House of Senators, right? The Senate House is only 8 representatives in the entire American history. Only 8 black folks have ever risen up to become senator, and one of them become president. So he only got to be a senator for 2 of the years and not for 6 of the years. So for a moment, black folks had control of part of a government, and the Constitution that they drew up was badass, and it was good. It's still good compared to today's standards. This is a better Constitution, than a lot of constitutions that I've seen. Better than what we've got now in Kentucky. If we was to pass the South Carolina Constitution of 1868 for Kentucky, we would be advancing. We would actually have a document that's one coherent document. And our law stems from one coherent document. But the document was very progressive. It was democratic. It allowed for home rule. It allowed for public education, and allowed for social spending. So the Freedmen's Bureau, they would take Confederate lands and get redistributed back to the freedmen's. But there's also the Union soldiers who needed land, and the Confederates need to live somehow too, right? So there need to be some new order that would say, well, the Confederates, your rights are stripped. Here's the new system, and here's the new government that we're going to put in place, and that's going to maintain. But unfortunately, because they didn't include the Confederates, just a few of them ex-Confederates, right, placate some of these people. But because they didn't do that, it's kind of like with Hitler. They try to crush one political party, or the Pequot. They try to wipe out one nation, And when they try to do that, they come back bigger and stronger than ever. Bismarck did it with the Catholics too, with the Kulturkampf. Sometimes it can be successful. Sometimes they can wipe out, the entire nation. Pequods barely survived. They're barely surviving today. So I could see, I don't see a future where they're not here, but I could see something fucked up happening. I mean, they're only like 50 families or so, and probably less than that. So the colored men in the convention possess by long odds the largest share of mental calibre. They are all the best debaters. Some of them are peculiarly apt in raising and sustaining points of order. There is a homely but strong grasp of common sense in what they say, and although the mistakes made are frequent and ludicrous, the South Carolinians are not slow to acknowledge that their destinies really appear to be safer in the hands of these unlettered Ethiopians than they would be if confided to the more unscrupulous care of the white men in the body. So the unlettered Ethiopians, right? Still racism, but they're saying that it's better to have unlettered, uneducated Ethiopians, unlettered meaning what? They're not distinguished in letters. They know how to read and write, but they're unlettered, so it almost makes it sound like they're illiterate. But they're saying that these so-called literate Africans were putting more trust in them than they would with the fucking evil fucking white supremacist. From the 1868 South Carolina's Constitution, established a balanced tripartite form of government for the first time in South Carolina's history. It established comprehensive local government, replacing the patchwork of specialized commissions which handed everything from roads to welfare, created a detailed Declaration of Rights which mandated political equality regardless of race, mandated statewide public education for the first time, right? Declaration of Rights, comprehensive local governments, home rule, welfare program for the poor and the old and the disabled, channeled through the county governments. So we got, Social Security, we got Medicare, Medicaid, and we got, Christianity. We got true Christianity. They actually give a shit about the poor. Christians who actually give a shit about the poor. Let's forget about putting Christ in Christmas. Let's just try to put Christ back into Christians. All these damn Christians and Baptists and Protestants and Catholics, but how many people are actually curing fucking poverty? In fact, maybe some of these institutions are actually here to maintain the inequality, just like Mother Teresa was doing. There's blessing in suffering, so you need to stay poor because then you get to be, go to heaven because you're the ones that suffer. No, that's not the fucking point. Elevate a motherfucker, don't say you're going to help and then keep a hand on a person's fucking head. What the fuck? Also removed the requirement of owning property in order to vote. So that helps poor whites. Poor whites, you don't own property. Now you have a right to vote. So that, that was progressive in every sense, in every which way. And the 1868 Constitution was different. Submitted to the people, and then they said that eventually it got fucking crushed. So that's unfortunate, but that's a bright shining moment. 71 to 76 of the 124 members of the Constitutional Convention were African Americans. 71 to 76 of the 124 members of the Constitutional Convention in South Carolina of 1868, which formed the new Constitution that was more progressive than most constitutions that I've seen, was majority black. And so we had a bright shining moment. These unlettered Ethiopians put down a good system and basis of law. And I even have like some of the passage of the document that I was reading. So here's the Constitution itself. Okay, we the people, the state of South Carolina, in convention assembled, grateful to Almighty God. Look, we're seeing Christianity for this opportunity, deliberately and peaceably of entering into an explicit and solemn compact with each other and forming a new constitution of civil government for ourselves and posterity, recognizing the necessity of the protection of the people and all that pertains to their freedom, safety, and tranquility, and imploring the direction of the great legislator of the universe, do agree upon, ordain, and establish the following: Declaration of Rights and Form of Government as the Constitution of the Commonwealth of South Carolina. Article 1, Declaration of Rights. This is always my favorite. We barely got the Bill of Rights. So Section 1, all men are born free and equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among them are the rights of enjoying and defending their lives and liberties, of acquiring possessing and protecting property, and of seeking and obtaining their safety and happiness. Slavery shall never exist in this state, neither shall involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted. All political powers vested in and derived from the people only. Therefore, they have the right at all times to modify their form of government in such manner as they may deem expedient when the public good demands. Every citizen of the state owes paramount allegiance to the Constitution and the government of the United States, and no law or ordinance of this state in contravention or subversion thereof can have any binding force. Because remember, the Confederates are worse than the Klan, who's a terrorist, a low-intensity terrorist organization. The Klan, or the Confederates, was a high-intensity terrorist organization. And so the Confederates were treasonous. They not only said, fuck your government, but we're going to fucking, we're going to kill motherfuckers if you try to say that we're still part of this fucking bullshit experiment. We're going to keep our damn slaves, and there ain't shit you can do about it. And Lincoln was like, look, slaves, no slaves. That's not the point. It's union. We're brothers. Stay with me, brother. And the whites were like, fuck this. Fuck, he wants to get rid of slavery. He talked about it a couple times. I'm scared. And they fucking ran. I ain't staying part of this union. Fuck this union. You're going to have black folks as a part of this union? Fuck this union. Sounds like my damn cousins, to be honest with you. The Pig Clan. The Pig Clan of Boone County. So, all men are born free and equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among them are the rights to enjoy and defend their lives and liberty, acquire and possess it. Right, I already said all this. So, the state shall remain a member of the American Union. All attempts from whatever source or upon whatever pretext to dissolve the said union shall be resisted with the whole power of South Carolina. The right of the people peacefully to assemble, to consult for the common good, to petition the government or any department thereof shall never be abridged. All persons may speak freely, write and publish their sentiment.